This is Return to Base, a Veteran Life podcast.
Welcome to Return to Base, where we talk with leaders shaping the military and veteran space. People who didn't stop serving when they took off the uniform. I'm your guest host today, Christie Nix, active duty Army spouse for 22 years. Most recently, I earned the title of veteran spouse for the last year and a half. So if you're good at math, we've been married just over 23 years. We have 3 kids. My oldest is 20 at University of Georgia. My middle's 18, starting her first year of college. And we have a 13-year-old that we homeschool. And we just recently retired in the Fort Stewart, Georgia area. Today's conversation is all about entrepreneurship, storytelling, and the power of community. Our guest is Army veteran Curtez Riggs, founder of the Military Influencer Conference, better known as MIC. What began as a small gathering of military content creators has grown into the premier event connecting veterans, military spouses, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, brands, and digital creators from across the military community. This September marks MIC's 10th anniversary, a milestone that reflects not only how much the conference has grown, but how dramatically the military creator space itself has evolved over the past decade. Today, we'll talk about Curtez and his military journey, why he saw an opportunity before most people even knew what an influencer was, how MIC has grown into a national community, and where he sees military storytelling heading next. Curtez, welcome to Return to Base. It's so great to have you here. Before we talk about MIC, which I know you're excited to talk about, I'd love to start with your own military journey. Tell us about your time in the Army and what first inspired you to serve.
Christy, once again, thanks for having me. Great question. To answer that, I have to take you back to my hometown of Flint, Michigan. I grew up believing I had a path, and that was consisted of graduating from high school, getting that diploma, and then getting a job inside of one of the automotive factories in Flint, Michigan. But there was this thing called NAFTA that came through, and essentially it decimated the auto industry in the city of Flint. So I had to take a step back, reconsider what my future was going to look like, and it ultimately led me into a Marine Corps recruiting station. And I remember walking into that office of the Marine Corps. He took off his jacket, he put it on my shoulder. I looked at my cousin and I said, this is pretty interesting. I wasn't expecting this approach from a recruiter. The recruiter looked me right in the face and he said, "Now, son, do you feel like a man?" And of course I said, "No, I'm from a hood kid from Flint, Michigan. That's not the best way to get my attention." So me and my cousin ended up laughing our way out of the recruiting office for the Marine Corps, and we walked right next door over to the Army. And I remember I sat down with my recruiter at the time. His name was Sergeant Brown. He had a very completely different approach. He kind of befriended me. He put me in a situation where he was explaining my options, and he put me in a position where he helped me see what my future could look like if I chose the Army as an option to help me down that path of transition. So ultimately, I ended up signing. I enlisted in the Army as a 19 Delta Cavalry Scout. I graduated early from high school. So I graduated in February. I shipped out to basic training a few weeks later, and then I didn't come back until after I completed 1 station unit training at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
And then how long was you in the service?
I served for 21 years. Like I said, I began my career at Fort Bragg, North Carolina with the 82nd Airborne Division. I ended up transitioning into the recruiting command, and I spent the better part of 14 years serving, learning how to be a recruiter and lead the next generation into the Army.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've worn several hats since leaving the military. Did you always know that entrepreneurship was part of your future?
Back in Flint, Michigan, I really didn't have a lot, so I was constantly looking for a way to extend the resources that I had. So I've always had this sense of the inner hustler inside of me. I was hustling back at the age of 14. I remember going back to the baseball diamonds and picking up after the people after they finished their game. So in Michigan, we had a bottle deposit. So I can honestly look back and say that my first job, or I should say my first entrepreneurial venture, involved me going to baseball diamonds, picking up bottles and cans, Coke cans, and you name it, and taking them to the grocery store for that bottle return that was provided to me. So entrepreneurship has always been at the forefront of my vision. even while I was serving. Over the years, I've had multiple ventures that I've run over the course of time, from having odd jobs while I was concurrently serving, learning how to build out a brand in the digital space. But the thing was, for me, I got to a point where I realized that, the Army is an institution and it's very unique with this approach. The military, I should say, is an institution. So I told myself that my transition story wasn't going to put me in a situation where I ended up working for someone else. Ultimately, I ended up retiring from the military, launching my own venture, and I found success kind of like carving out my own pathway. Of course, I haven't always been an entrepreneur. I have multiple things working at any given time. But the most important thing that I've learned is that, it's one thing to have an idea, it's another thing to push that idea towards a concept and actually start executing to achieve your goals. So it's important to me. I'm always looking for my next thing. So I have an addictive personality, and I found that entrepreneurship is the thing that helps me pursue and also, keeps my ADD at bay.
I would imagine so. So you spent 2 decades in the military, which you called an institution, so very different than entrepreneurship, I would say. Were there leaders throughout your career who shaped the way you think about business and entrepreneurship today?
So my journey in the digital space began because I got in trouble by a sergeant major. So back in 2007, 2008 timeframe, the Army transitioned our uniforms. And so we went from the BDUs to ACUs. And of course, I could be off about that timeline, right? The thing that I remember, though, is that Nike boots came out. And so Nike went from entering the commercial space into the, military uniform space. So they created a special pair of boots. By far, they were the most comfortable boots that anyone could find in our space. And so for me, I was walking around with these boots. I felt like I was full of myself. I was a young sergeant first class. And I had this old crusty E9 approach me one day and he said, "Hey, Riggs, those boots that you're wearing aren't authorized." And so I looked him in the face and I said, "Hey, I bought these from the PX. There's no way that they can't be authorized." And what this sergeant major told me, kind of like helped me to understand not so much about entrepreneurship, but he challenged me to a point that pushed me in a direction that I had never considered before. So when the sergeant major started to lecture me about my boots, he challenged me to like, "Hey, what I want you to do is tell me why these boots are authorized." And so I started down this journey. I went back to the PX, I went to the clothing sales, and I looked at every single boot that was available for sale. And what I found was that the PX were literally selling things that didn't comply with Army Regulation 670-1. So it put me in a situation where I had to go back to the sergeant major. I had to admit that I was wrong, and then I had to tell him the why. In my job in the Army or the recruiting command at that time, I was the senior trainer. So I was one of the individuals that was responsible to deploy across a set geographical region in the country and essentially train other recruiters how to do their profession. And so I ended up having to create a database, typically a spreadsheet. I had an image of every single boot that was sold at the PX. And then I had a red for they weren't authorized and a green for the ones that were authorized. I realized that the spreadsheet couldn't reach as far as I wanted to. So what I ended up doing was building out a static website that listed all of the boots, and it began with just an image and then a green or red check mark. What I learned was that site started to get so much traffic that I was introduced to this concept called affiliate marketing. And essentially, if you're familiar with the internet and the way things work, if you click a button, somebody somewhere is getting paid. And I wanted to be one of those guys that were finding a way to get paid online. And so I learned about affiliate marketing. I found this platform called CJ or commissionjunction.com. I registered as an affiliate. And so anytime somebody came to this website to learn about a boot, to figure out whether or not it was authorized or not, whichever link that they click, I was receiving a 10% commission on it. And so before viral became a thing, this ugly little boot site of mine started to grow. It started to reach people all across the military connected community, and my commissions were racking up. So the person that really steered me into this digital space, that got me motivated to really learn more about entrepreneurship, happened very unintentionally. This sergeant major was just challenging me, but the way my mind works, I was constantly looking for my next thing. He introduced me to a concept that has completely changed my life.
That's amazing. So you became a creator because you created a solution to a problem that you had from your time in the military, and you found a way to make money from it. That's awesome. So this year marks the 10th Military Influencer Conference. Take us back to the beginning of that. What was your goal when you launched MIC?
Well, I want to say that I just talked about how I got started in this space. You know, you use the term as of a creator, but back then I didn't know exactly what that was. I just knew that at one point in time, I had a website. People were coming to this website, and I was receiving commissions on everything that was sold. This site ended up being purchased from me by a large boot manufacturer very early on in my, I should say, digital career or my career as a creator. So this boot manufacturer stepped in and they acquired this website that I had made. And at the time, I didn't understand that a digital website could be treated like a physical commodity, no different than people buy or sell their homes. And what I did was I took the proceeds from that and I started to look across the internet, and I was looking for military related websites that were being underutilized or they weren't being updated. And so what I would do was I would find the owner of that site and I would make them a very simple offer, right? In most cases, people back then didn't understand that they were in possession of an asset, and I learned a very simple way of offering them something that they didn't expect. So what I was doing, I was building out a portfolio of websites, and I had also got brought into a circle at USAA because USAA had a program called Digital MillX, and basically USAA was teaching early creators how to expand their brands with the intention of doing more for USAA. So I talked about affiliate programs. Very early on, USAA had a very competitive affiliate program, and most of the other military connected banks also had one. And so as an affiliate, I'm driving traffic, I'm receiving commissions, and my business is growing. And I realized that, man, there are more websites out there. I want to figure out a way to bring more creators into my fold so I could kind of like pick and choose which websites I wanted to purchase or acquire. This led me to launch the very first iteration of the Military Influencer Conference, and it was called Mill Blogging at that point in time. So early on, I have to take you way back to the surge. There were military influencers or military creators, military bloggers that were on the front lines telling their story. And what they did was back in 2009 to 2012, they came back from the front and they actually had the very first version of a military influencer conference, and it was called Mill Blogging. Something happened to the leadership in 2012, that brand died away, but it was a perfect time for me to step in and buy those assets and relaunch it as something different. So going through this event with USAA, I was learning all these different things, being connected with a lot of great people. And so I had the idea that, hey, look, I'm going to launch my own event. And this event ended up becoming the Military Influencer Conference. So we started with like 220 people that registered. By the end of the event, there were less than 100 people in the room. But by that time, we had the foundation of committed people. You can call them influencers, you can call them content creators, you can call them creators. We didn't know what we were at that time, but we were onto something. And Mick became the go-to event where people had to show up, not only to learn the trade, but most importantly, get a chance to connect with the people that they had nurtured relationships with online.
Yeah, so you had proof of concept and then it grew from there. That's amazing. So you're a bit of an acquirer as well, it sounds like.
I think that's one way to put it. I've learned that over the years, I can only do so much. And there's a lot of great people in the space that are looking for ways to monetize. And sometimes that process comes in the form of an exit. If I see an opportunity, I'm all about capitalizing.
Yeah, that's amazing. So did you ever imagine that Mick would grow into what it is today?
No, when you create something, you cast a vision. You kind of like create a roadmap. You kind of like lay everything out. You lay things out, but the reality was I was still only one person with minimal support and a very small team. So seeing how we started, like I said, at the end of the second day, there were less than 100 people in the room. This year, we're on track to host over 4,000 service members, veterans, and spouses, and military connected leaders all under one roof in Tampa. So I can honestly say, when I cast the vision, I never saw it getting to this point, but I try to stay humble. I try to lift up as many people as we possibly can. But most importantly, I haven't really forgot where we came from.
That's incredible. So was there ever a moment in the course of the last 10 years, obviously we know where you are now, very successful with Mick, but that you wondered whether it would actually work once you did cast that vision and you saw the potential? And obviously the world of digital entrepreneurship has only grown in the course of that time as well. Did you ever wonder if it would actually work or stick, or that you'd still even be here 10 years later?
Yeah, think about COVID. So I run an events-based business. COVID came out of nowhere. And so 2019, we had 1,000 people in a room in DC. I was on a high, literally. And the next year, this thing called COVID came out of nowhere. And so what I've learned in this space is that, cash moves mountains. And so in 2019, right after that MIC ended, I put myself in a situation where I said, hey, we're doing San Antonio in 2020. I secured the venue. I took cash. I paid for everything to kind of like secure the best rates. I found our support venues, the venues we were going to do our receptions and parties and other restaurants. I prepaid everything because once again, with cash, I got the best rates. So I
Mhm.
found myself in a position where I am financially extended. I'm waiting on sponsor revenue to roll in. But then there's this thing called COVID that completely came out of nowhere and flipped the world upside down. So now I'm not only extended from the business standpoint, my personal credit lines are also at risk because I had to pull money out of pocket to do this, right? And so at that point in time, I'm not thinking about what Mick is going to look like in 2026. I'm literally thinking about how am I going to maintain the relationships that I've nurtured over the years, but most importantly, how am I going to give people money back when they've already prepaid for an event that can't even exist anymore? So at that point in time, absolutely not. I had no idea that Mick was going to survive that season or if Mick was going to be able to grow to where it is today. And so that was a hard lesson. COVID, of course, forced us to switch gears. We ended up doing 2 years of virtual events, but it wasn't the same thing. I was able
Mhm.
to maintain sponsor relationships. I was able to endure during that period, but it also put me in a situation where I had to go through my own acquisition process in order to sustain the brand and put it in a position where it could not only recover from COVID, but most importantly, it could continue on with the mission that I had started.
Yeah, that was certainly a challenging time for anyone in the event space as well, but it sounds like you made a successful pivot and here you are.
Yep, on track to be of course, our 10th year and also the biggest event that we've had up to this point in time.
That's incredible.
After years in the Army, I got pretty used to moving, but sometimes you land somewhere that feels like home. For my family, that's exactly what happened. If you're looking to put down roots of your own, Navy Federal Credit Union's Home Buyer's Choice Loan offers down payment options as low as 0% with no required private mortgage insurance. Navy Federal Credit Union, our members are the mission. Navy Federal is federally insured by NCUA Equal Housing Lender. Terms and conditions apply. Loan subject to approval and eligibility requirements. Learn more at navyfederal.org/zerodown.
So, because today the military creator economy feels established, but 10 years ago, there really wasn't a roadmap. One of the things that stands out about MIC is the community that's been built around it. It's not just creators talking to creators, it's nonprofits, veteran service organizations, military leaders, government agencies, and brands all in one place. Why has that collaboration been so important and something that you financially put yourself on the line for in all those years during COVID and after?
Every person goes through their own individual point of transition. What I learned is that during those times that I was forced to go through another transition, what I found was is during that time there were people that stepped up to support me. And through that, they left the ladder down. They got to a point in life and they hadn't forgot where they came from. So that really is really important to me. Now, here I am. I'm almost at my 50th birthday in a few short years. And there's a lot of people over the years that I've looked back upon, and I've realized that I have a unique opportunity now to leave the ladder down and help as many people climb it as I possibly can. The best way to do that is an event like Mick. People refer to Mick as the annual family reunion. And think about that for a minute. Well, why is it a family reunion? It's a family reunion because it's an opportunity for people to reconnect, re-nurture, or rebuild relationships, but most importantly, stay in touch with the community that we all care about, right? I am almost 8 years removed from service. I enlisted almost 30 years ago, right? This year represents the 30th year from my enlistment. And so all I want to do now is make sure that Mick remains a destination where service members, veterans, brands, creators, entrepreneurs, influencers, or whatever other name you have for the community can connect, can collaborate at one location with with the intention of bringing the next generations of leaders up and teaching them an alternative path to success. That's how I see Mick, and that's how I see that our growth is going to continue from 2026 beyond.
Mm-hmm. So it leads me into my next question very well. Why is mentorship such an important part of the conference?
Mentorship is so important because no one can do it on their own. I like to think of it as, we have successful people that come to MIC with the entire intention of giving back their time and resources to support those that are following in our footsteps. Mentorship is important because it's needed, it's critical, it's important. And I think those of us that have reached a certain point in our lives, it's our opportunity to give back. So it keeps me young, it keeps me relevant, but most importantly, there's a cohort of individuals who have that same mindset, right? They are like-hearted individuals, and I didn't say like-minded, I said like-hearted, because MIC has managed to curate a cohort of people that have the heart to give back. There's who want to support those that are following in our footsteps. I say those that are following in our footsteps a lot because everything that I do at this point in my life is literally for those that are coming behind us, right? I have my oldest son is 25. He spent 6 years in the Air Force and left honorably, and now he's living his best life with his dream job. And so I think about Mick. I think about the impact that mentorship had on his life to getting where he's at today. And in most cases, I was able to introduce him to key mentors to help shape that change. And so that's how I see Mick. I want to just put in as many people as we possibly can in a room and then make connections that drive relationships that ultimately shape change.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Any area where you're looking to have growth, I think leading the next generation, one of the big pieces of the puzzle is just giving them permission to dream, to have vision, that they can be successful, more specifically during or after a military service, because it's unlike most career paths. And so a room of 4,000 people where they have permission to rock whatever it is they choose and create those relationships so they can rock it even better once they leave. So reaching 10 years is a major milestone. When you look back over the last decade, what are you most proud of?
So the thing that I'm most proud of about Mick is the relationships that collectively we've been able to nurture. I am most proud of the individual able to step into the conference completely lost. There are individuals that were standing up against a wall, unsure of how they fit. But we had people, a part of the cohort, a part of the individuals that come to MIC continuously year after year, that were able to extend a hand, help that individual understand what their challenges was, but most importantly, they've been able to walk them through that journey. I'm most proud of the cohort of individuals that come out every single year with the heart to give back to those that are coming behind us. That's what I'm most proud of, and that's what I love most about the conference that we've been able to create.
Yeah. So what excites you most about this year's conference?
The thing that excites me the most beyond the parties, right?
Okay, that makes me excited now.
Awesome. Is we decided, so our general manager is a lady named Kathy Torres Pummel. She recently graduated from the VLP, Veterans Leadership Program at the George Bush Institute. And one of the things that she brought back with us was a problem. We, in our space, are surrounded by great organizations doing phenomenal work. In most cases, the larger organizations receive the most accolades, they receive the most support, they receive the most funding. But man, there are a ton of individuals in our space that are doing great work, accomplishing phenomenal missions, and they stay within their niche. And in a lot of cases, these small organizations are operating on a shoestring budget of less than $100,000 a year, but their impact in comparison with a lot of the larger organizations is significantly different, right? So what we've been able to do this year that I think we collectively are most proud of is this thing called the Impact Awards. You've heard of a pitch competition, but there's not one in our space that's focused on just small scale nonprofits with the intention of not only providing them financial resources, helping them to share their story, but putting them in a cohort type of environment where they can grow, where they can thrive, and ultimately scale their organization. So the thing that I'm most proud of this MIC is the Impact Awards that we've been able to build out with the support of H&K Law, with the support of Amazon, and also Zero Meals, right? So we were able to take Kathy's vision, build it into something that's going to exceed our initial expectations. So this is the first year of that. But as I think about what does the next 10 years of MIC look like, MIC will also be an economy of scale for organizations that are doing phenomenal work that don't receive the traditional resources that a lot of the organizations in our space receive.
One thing about military life is you get used to moving. New duty stations, new houses, new towns. Most places are just another stop along the way. Every once in a while, you end up somewhere and think, you know what? I could see myself staying here. That's what happened to my family. The challenge today is that putting down roots isn't as easy as it used to be. Home prices are high, inventory is tight. Buying a home can feel overwhelming. That's why Navy Federal Credit Union's Home Buyer's Choice loan caught my attention. It offers down payment options as low as 0% with no required private mortgage insurance. Plus, you can get up to $9,000 cash back to help cover closing costs through Realty Plus. Look for your sign on NavyFederal.org. Navy Federal Credit Union. Our members are the mission. Navy Federal is federally insured by NCUA Equal Housing Lender. Terms and conditions apply. Loan subject to approval and eligibility requirements. Learn more at NavyFederal.org/0down. Benefits vary by transaction and location. No Navy Federal financing required. Terms, restrictions, and conditions apply. Visit NavyFederalRealtyPlus.com.
So, how has Mick changed you personally?
If I think about the first 3 years that I stood on stage and I held a mic and I talked about Mick, my thought process was more about me, right? I enjoyed being in front of the crowd. I enjoyed sharing a part of my story before I really even had one, right? I was a trainer in the Army. I knew how to train and educate and empower, but I wasn't a proven entrepreneur at that point in time. I was just somebody trying to figure it out. So COVID humbled me, and it also forced me through this process of rebuilding myself personally. I started to realize that it's not about who's in front of the mic. It's really about who's doing the most work. I started to realize that Mick was a platform where I could elevate other people instead of continuing to parade around myself, right? So the biggest change for me was learning how to make that transition from somebody that was self-sustaining, independent, that was all about himself, to now being in a position where I'm really intentionally thinking about the person that's sitting in a seat. I am intentionally crafting an experience that's focused on creating an opportunity for those that need it the most. There's a lot of people that come to Mick hungry, and I'm not talking about in a physical sense. I'm talking about they're hungry for change, they're going through a transition, and they're looking for an opportunity to change the course of their life. They have passion, they're full of hunger, but they don't know how to eat. And so Mick has now become one of these places where not only we can teach people how to hunt, we can teach them how to eat, and we can also help them to sustain what they're building, and then continue to reach back. Mick has just made me less selfish. I think that's the easiest way to answer that question.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. So for someone attending Mick for the very first time this year, like I will be, what is your biggest piece of advice?
Mick is overwhelming. Mick is like 6 events in one. I like to say that Mick is a giant umbrella that we've managed to put several different things inside of. So we have an expo hall, we have a hiring fair, we have a VA claims clinic. The Mick is built out with 6 content tracks. We have this whole creator economy that's going to be a part of it. We have pitch competitions, and people are just there to network, right? The biggest thing that I would say for someone like you that's coming out for the first time is don't get overwhelmed, right? You don't have to attend every single session. You don't have to go to every single networking activation. The thing that you need to realize is, why are you really showing up? Why are you coming out? And then spend time looking at who's coming to the conference and kind of like taking time to put together your hit list of people that you want to meet. So I'll use myself as an example. We're meeting for the first time in this virtual format. We're going through a podcast. There may be something I said to inspire you, right? You can't go to Mick and meet 3,999 people. It's impossible. But what you can do is segment that journey, identify 10 people you would really like to spend time with, right? When the app is released, identify who those people are. Make sure that there's a purpose that they could potentially have in your life. Make sure that you understand what you're there for and what your small pitch is. Know who you are and what you're looking for. And then ask that person for time. In most cases, that individual is going to tell you yes. And when you have the chance to meet them, don't just be that individual that's just showing up to ask for something. I always tell people, believe it or not, you're bringing something to the table. Give more than you receive, and you'll be amazed at the fruit that comes back at you.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what do you hope every attendee walks away with, even if it's their 10th year in a row they've been to Mick? What do you want them to walk away with?
A new relationship. I want everyone to come to Mick and either renew a relationship or leave with someone new. I want people to leave with a new partnership, someone that they can either mentor or support, or someone that they can look up to learn how to take the next step of their journey.
Yeah. So you've built something that's helped connect thousands of people across the military community. If you could leave listeners with one message about leadership, entrepreneurship, or service after the military, what would it be?
I'm going to start with what I always say is the definition of influence. And so Back in 1997, when I was going through basic training, the first definition I was forced to learn was the definition of leadership. And it says that leadership is the process of influencing others. A lot of people look at the Military Influencer Conference and they think that there's just influencers in the room. To me, everyone's an influencer, but the most important thing to take into consideration is how are you leading those that influence? How are you leading and helping others to shape change? The other thing that I would say is that no idea is small. You know, if you think about people having ideas, at one point in time, people told me Mick was the dumbest thing that they ever heard of. And look at it today. What I didn't allow was people that didn't understand my mission or didn't understand my vision to diminish what my dreams were. I found the resources, I curated the relationships, I built the infrastructure to grow Mick to what it is today. And I'm not saying it as if I built it all on my own. There have been dozens of people that have helped me along the journey, but along the way, I didn't listen to the people who told me no.
Yeah, finding people with belief, right? I love the phrase, borrow my belief until you have what you need of your own. So it sounds like it's another place where you can really, if you're not quite sure what you need, maybe you're just going to borrow somebody's belief for a minute. So how can people learn more about the Military Influencer Conference, or better yet, be a part of it next month in Tampa?
Awesome. So visit us at militaryinfluencer.com. I would say that our best social media platform is LinkedIn. If you want to learn more about me, you want to learn more about Mick or the mission. Also, I know a few people, so don't let Mick be a financial obstacle. If you want to come out and you want to experience the event, don't get caught up on the logistics. Please reach out, use the contact form, and we can figure out how to provide you the support that you need to be a part of the experience.
That's beautiful. We hope to see so many of you there. Definitely come see us. We'll be there as well. I will be on Podcast Row, so I hope to meet lots of our listeners. Curtez, my understanding is the Military Influencer Conference is about bringing together people who care deeply about serving the military community and helping them amplify one another's voices. Over the last 10 years, you've helped create a space where veterans, military spouses like myself, nonprofits, entrepreneurs, and creators can connect, collaborate, and continue serving in new ways. Congratulations on this incredible milestone, and thank you for continuing to invest in the military community.
Thank you, Christy. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode of Return to Base, make sure to subscribe and share it with someone who should hear it. And if you're heading to this year's Military Influencer Conference, take advantage of every conversation. You never know which connection might become your next opportunity or your next mission. I'm Christie Nix, signing off the net.